Hello Internet! Today we are going to be working with Asteroids VR and we're going to be finishing up our grappling hook, or at least getting it to a place that is closer to done than it currently is. So right now we can have our controller and kind of shoot these. I've added it so that if you release the button, it deletes it, which means you can kind of shoot these, and if you drop it, it just goes away, which is great, and it sticks to the wall, everything's fine. Doesn't do anything though. That's kind of an important part with the grappling hook, is that it does something. Like, all it does is draw a line. Okay, great. What we need to do is actually pull the player towards whatever they hit. So once the projectile has hit something, we want to pull the player after that. So not before it's hit anything. That doesn't really make any sense. But once you actually anchor to something, I want to add force that actually pulls you towards that. The problem is our character, our VR player, they don't have a physics anything. There's no rigid body attached to them or anything like that. So that can kind of make things a little bit odd. So just to kind of give you an idea here, we have all of these boxes and things, but none of them have anything. Actually, hold on. I may have lied. There's our camera rig, and it's got a rigid body. Huh. We might be able to use this. This might work even better. So in order to get this to work, we're going to need to find our player and actually use this. I like the idea of using the rigid body over the flight controller. That was sort of what I was planning on doing. There's a VRTK flight controller that's actually not shipped with VRTK. I wrote that. But it does similar stuff. It does handles all the flight stuff, so actually flying around. It does all of that. So you've seen that before in the previous video, so I'm not going to go too much into flying. Watch the previous video. It's got actual scenes where I'm just flying around. I'll probably throw some more after we get the grappling hooks working, because I feel like that's going to just make it so much better. So if we have our camera rig, if I can get this rigid body, I think we're golden, because then all I need to do is connect the bullet or our grappling hook onto that rigid body, and then everything should just work. The trick is going to be actually getting this component. I think I should be able to just look for this VRTK player object and get the rigid body off of that. I'm like 80% sure that's how that's going to work. And the other part of me is being like, nah, that's not going to work. So let's try it. We have our projectile thruster, maximum distance, force stop projectile. None of these actually pertain at all to a grappling hook. So really all we have is a projectile that we shoot, it hits something and stops. Great. So what I want to do is actually have it pull. Hold on. I'm missing something. Grapple launcher does all of that. Our grappling hook is going to have some other stuff on it. Prefabs, that's wrong. Did I put my grappling hook in some weird obscure place? I feel like I might have. I know it's here. Where? Oh, player tools. Okay, sure. What is this using? Those three things, and it looks like that's it. So it's not actually going to be updating anything for like a line render or anything like that. So we're going to have to handle that. Great. So because none of that is handled, we're going to actually create another script that is going to do all of this fun stuff. It's not a projectile anymore. This is strictly grappling things. So grapple. In the previous implementation of this, I used a spring. So let's try that. Spring connector. And so the idea here, we don't need the spring. At least my intention is not to have the spring follow the line. I don't think that makes any sense. and it just adds complications. We actually already have a simulation of the spring going all the way between all of that. That's great, and it kind of adds to the realism. It makes it kind of wobble. But I want it to be more of a linear thing, so it's a little bit more predictable. The more joints we add in between there, the harder it's going to be to actually predict how it's going to work. And in this, I think predictability is way more important than realism. You're a guy flying through asteroids and blowing them up with bombs. So realism is already way out the window, but I just think this makes more sense. So we have our grapple. Let's attach this grapple spring connector thing. Sure. Move up. And so force stop projectile is sort of going to be our trigger. That's what's actually going to do something. There we go. Again, with the dialogues freezing Unity, it's very weird. So force stop projectile currently makes the rigid body kinematic when it's stopped, which means it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to stick to it. I did add this after the fact, so it actually will adhere to it. So if you shoot something that's rotating, for example, this is going to parent it to that object. So as that object continues to rotate, it tracks with it instead of not, which wouldn't make any sense, especially with moving things, because asteroids are going to be moving. This would cause your grapple hook to hit it, and then the asteroid would just float away and your grapple would just stay there. That doesn't make any sense. So this hopefully fixes that. We can either do one of two things. We can either watch this is kinematic, and when it becomes kinematic, create a spring and pull the two towards one another. Or we can do a different thing. I also don't like the kinematic, which is why we're going to do the other one, because I kind of want to create a joint here instead. That way, if I use a joint and join it to a rigid body, if there's one there, the advantage of that is the asteroid itself will get pulled towards you, which means for large asteroids, you will swing around them. But for small ones, you could actually grab it and pull it towards you if you wanted to. I feel like that'd be really cool. And so that'll all be a cool little physicsy thing. So we're going to actually use a message instead. The reason is kinematic. If we're just watching that, I'm kind of tying myself to this implementation instead of doing something entirely separate. So tying it to is kinematic would work in this case, but it only worked temporarily. If I ever needed to change this, the code for actually creating my grappling hook would break as well. And I don't want that. So we are going to send a message called projectile impact. That's just going to say I hit something. That's it. We don't need anything else because all this is going to say is I hit something, do something. It doesn't matter what, but every single component that's attached to this game object now is going to see this message if they have a function that's called projectile impact. So we just need to add one to this grapple spring connector. We don't care about the void or the start or the update. Doesn't really matter. We can have a projectile impact. That's just a void function. Doesn't take anything in because it doesn't need to. And so for now, just to make sure it's getting called, we're just going to call projectile impacted. There we go. So there's nothing special here that's happening. Doesn't really do anything. That's great. And so grapple, all of that's great. It's already connected. So if I shoot the wall now, I should see a console message that says whatever I said to say, projectile impacted. And so we should be able to start this, take this, and shoot it at a wall. That's the general idea. So this goes like this. Ignore the asteroids in the background. That's a totally separate project. They're just a distraction. But we do that, hits there, send message failed, no receiver. So projectile impact was called, but nothing was there to receive it. So I've clearly done messaging wrong. That's what that means. Huh. I think that's my response here. Huh. Oh. Oh. I know what's going on. Apply. Done. Fixed. That's all I needed to do. I hadn't applied the prefab, which means that the grapple spring connector didn't exist, wasn't connected, everything was broken. So now we should shoot that and we get projectile impacted. You can't see that because it's under my face. So we go console, there's a bunch of other things here, but projectile impacted is right there, which means that this is working. We actually got an impact. And so there's two things I want to do. First, we are going to attach a spring joint to this. It's not going to do anything. It's not attached to a rigid body or anything like that. The anchor is going to be 0. And we're not going to auto-configure the connected anchor. So it's a spring that's connected to nothing. Great. It's worthless. It's not accomplishing anything. But what we can do is when this connects, we can take this spring and actually connect it. So the advantage of doing it this way means that I can have theoretically multiple grapples. So maybe there's an upgrade, for example. I could have ones that have different things that actually get enabled. And so if I do a public spring joint, I actually want to see, yeah, that extends joint. So instead of doing a spring joint, I'm going to use a joint. It should have the same connected object, but this way, if I want to have them function a little bit differently, I can connect them and have all that functionality be separate. And then the different grapples will still function the same, although scripts will be the same. They'll just have different components on them. I think this makes sense, but we'll see. If I run into issues, I can always just go back to a spring, because that's really the one that I think makes the most sense. The other one I'm thinking of is just like a normal joint, because that forces it to be a specific distance away. And we could actually use that to do some cool things, like connecting to it with like rebar effectively, and then like throwing other asteroids around, like extendable clampy arm things. I feel like that could be fun. So just for now, we have our joint. And when we impact this, we're going to do joint dot anchor equals this dot get component of type rigid body. Now this doesn't really, oh, that's not right. Anchor is not the right word. Whoops. Connected body. There we go. So we're connecting to ourselves, which doesn't make any sense. There's no reason to actually do this, other than because I want to. So this isn't going to accomplish anything. It's not going to be that useful. But the advantage of doing this is we'll actually see this work. And then I can actually go and find out how to get my player's rigid body and use that. At least that's the idea. And so our spring, I set the spring to 0. So that's going to be the length of, that's not right. The min and max distance should be 0. The spring itself should be higher than that, like 16. I don't know good values. This is a bunch of tuning stuff that we'll have to figure out. It's all based on like player mass and object mass and all this other stuff. Distance, it's just math. And mostly just not math, but playing around with it and just seeing what feels good. It's hard to do that from here because it feels different in VR. And so that's sort of where all of that testing is going to happen. We may even have to build something that makes it easier to adjust that in VR. But the variable joint has not been assigned. Well, at least we know that part works. So let's take this spring joint and put it not there. Let's put it there. So our grapple is now assigned. We should be able to enable this, apply this, minimize our line render and our Bezier curve, because that just is extra stuff. and then disable this because we've applied it. And now we can test this. Hopefully it all just works. So we have our controller goes off and whoa. That was awesome. What did it do? Oh, that's so cool. So like that wasn't exactly what I intended, but that makes me really happy that we have the curve attached to this because that just looks sweet. Apparently it does things when it's attached to itself or when it's not attached to anything. And so that's what happened here. It started simulating itself and then it tried to assign it to itself and broke. I kind of want to just leave that and experiment with that for a little bit. So we're not going to fix whatever is causing it to like arc and curve and stuff. That's just going to stay there. But now we need to get our player stuff. So get player rigidbody. There's a function. Let's actually get the player rigidbody though. And so what this needs to do is game object.find object of type VR player VRTK. This is going to require an investigation. It's like player object or something. Game camera. So the problem is those are getting generated at runtime, the player and stuff. So I don't think I have a way to actually get them from here. Not easily, at least. And so we're going to delete this for now and return null instead. So that will at least allow this to compile and should fix our other issue of it crashing when we hit a wall. So this should start up. And then I need to figure out what's attached to my player. Something unique so that I can actually go and grab the player. So here's our camera. It's got a VRTK player object attached to it. And a Steam VR play area attached to it. So the problem with using the Steam VR play area is that's only going to work with a Vive because it's Steam specific. So we don't probably want that one because then Oculus, for example, not going to work. We could try the controller manager, but that's again a Steam thing. So I think our best option is the VRTK player object. And so if we grab that, hopefully we can grab the rigid body after we get that. So I should be able to get our player object. Player object. Like so. And then get component of type rigid body. And so that should attach our spring to our player. Which I should be able to get rid of that. There we go. That should be relatively straightforward. Get the player, get the rigid body for the player, attach it to the spring, and then the spring does its stuff and pulls you towards it. And then once you release it, the projectile gets deleted and the spring goes away with that. So I'm thinking my knowledge is, or my hypothesis is making sense. This is actually going to connect it, pull us towards it, and then we can release it whenever we want to, which is hopefully what we get. So, are we going to get another weird arc? Yep. And our player hasn't moved either. So, our grapple still exists even after this. Ignore all the asteroids. Where's the grapple? We're gonna need to search for this because I'm not seeing it. Grapple. And so it's connected to the headset controller, which is not connected to what we wanted. Dang. So it's actually connected to our headset. Oh, I see. Okay. So they have different types. So this one is our headset. The other one is the camera rig. So I want to get the camera rig out, is what I'm reading out of this. So they have an object type attached to them, which I'm assuming is just an enum. So I want to find all the objects of player object type and then use that. This might be a bad idea. I think we're going to get into a bunch of trouble by doing this, but it should help. Find objects of type that, and then I want the first object. We're going to use link for this. So the first is going to return the first object that matches a predicate. Predicate is a function that returns a Boolean. So just whatever matches it first gets returned, and then it just stops the function. So hopefully we get some extra stuff out of that, and it's just an easy way to find things. And so we want to take our player object and say, I want the player object type to be equal to the camera rig, is what we had decided. And then we're going to make this cleaner a little bit by putting it on 3 lines. And so now we're going to find all the objects that have a player object on them, iterate over all of them, and find the one that has the first one that's a camera rig. The camera rig should have a rigid body attached to it. We're going to use that. And then the hope, I haven't even tested this yet, probably should have, is we need that camera rig to not be kinematic. If it's kinematic, this isn't going to work. But there's one way to find out, so we're gonna try. My understanding, oops, click play twice. We're gonna test that prior to even starting any of this, because that's kind of important. If it's kinematic, we're wasting our time. It's not. Awesome. No gravity. It's not kinematic. The rotation is frozen, which is good. It means if things hit us, we don't wobble and spin out of control. So I should be able to shoot this, hit that. That's such a weird thing. I want to kind of, can I see what's happening? Yeah. That's very odd. Also, it didn't detect my release there. Why? Why does it curve over there? Is it just pulling it back towards the 0? So like here is going to be, I think, 0 in the scene. Maybe that's what's happening. But regardless, it's not actually pulling our player. But I think we can fix that, and I don't think I need to stop to get that to work. So let's crank this to about 10,000. There we go. That works now. So we can pull ourselves. The spring is way too strong now, though. So let's drop that to like 100. Too weak, and then we'll say like 500. I think that makes sense. I want it to be slow when you're near it and strong when you're far away. And so that's sort of what springs are good at. That's sort of how that works. So hopefully we're close. I'll up it to like 750. But I think that's good. We do need to figure out why it's curving, because that makes no sense. And I think we can do that by... No, I don't really know how we can do that. But... Because we can't connect the rigid body to itself. Oh. No, that can't be what's happening, because adding the spring was what caused this to start going crazy. It's not the rigid body, so the rigid body isn't getting pulled. But, So we set our velocity, we do all of that. Let's make this rotation fixed, which is going to prevent our grappling hook from rotating by its rigid body. It should still it might not. It should still rotate though if you connect to something. I could be wrong on that though. I've never really tried this. But this will tell us if it's a rotation thing, like our spring is causing it to rotate out of control. Looks like gravity? That doesn't make any sense. So like, I'm expecting this to go up, and it's clearly not. It's always going to that one position. So I think it's getting pulled straight to whatever, and that's just breaking things. So, is there a good way to handle this joint that isn't enabling it when this happens? Joint dot enable collision, enable pre-processing, active. I don't think there's a good way to do the abstraction that I wanted to. We may just have to create a spring at this point. So instead of doing this, we may have to do a this dot add component There's a way to add components. What am I doing? I feel like I'm going insane. There's got to be a way to add a component. I'm gonna go look this up because I'm missing something. There's a way to add a component to a game object. I'm just totally blanking on how to do that. Turns out that you actually just need to use it from the game object, not from the mono behavior. Today I learned. Well, I already knew that, but I'm gonna say it anyway. We're going to add a spring with this equal to bar spring. So the disadvantage of having to do it this way means that we're going to need to configure everything from inside here. So I'm going to need to give it like a strength. For example, public float strength equals 1000. That's going to need to be configured manually by me instead of doing something else. But it means we're not going to get pulled off course. So I guess that's a bonus. Spring dot spring equals strength. And I think that's everything for now. As I need to modify more of these things like the damper or the min-max distance, tolerances, things like that, As I need to modify those, we can add more of them. But for now, just the spring strength is sort of the important one, so that's what we're going to stick with. Which means that needs to go away. Weird, you can't disable the spring connector. Huh. Okay. Anyway, hopefully I've applied this. It should work now, which means our spring gets created only after we've hit something. So projectiles should go straight now. If they aren't, something else was the problem and I just completely misidentified it. But oh, here it goes. There we go. That didn't do what I wanted. We have our grapple though. It's connected. So if we try this grapple. Oh, auto configure is configured. We don't want that because what it did is it just created a spring and defined it so that the two anchor points were already perfectly separate from one another, which means we don't get pulled. If I turn this off and set all of these to 0, re-hold the button, and then enable this, we will get pulled. So I just need to turn off auto configure anchor and set the two anchor points to be vector.0, which means this spring auto configure equals false. Spring dot anchor equals vector3.0 and spring dot connected anchor equals vector3.0, which means now, hopefully, assuming all of this is correct, we should be able to pull ourselves through the scene using these grapples. That's sort of the end goal that we were going for. And so here's to hoping. Let's see here. Should be able to shoot that wall. Boop. Then we get pulled in, and we can use our fun little rotation thing and just do this. Oh, that's into a wall. Okay, that was too much. Whoa. So the problem with this is this is kind of based off of where the headset is as well as these. And so I'm making these rotations like this, but the headset is facing this way. So it's actually opposite. So if I go to the left, it goes the opposite direction for me. I don't know if that makes any sense on video because it might be different, but whatever. There we go. I should be able to hit the ground now and pull myself up there. There we go. So now we have these configurable grappling hooks that we can shoot around and fly around in. I'm going to end that here, I think, because that's sort of what I wanted to get done. We have the ability to kind of leapfrog between these. We might want the spring to be a little bit stronger, but I can kind of tweak that. And then once I get that tweaked, there will be a video after this of me flying around in VR playing with this with grappling hooks, because now we have grappling hooks. So hopefully that's as cool to play as I think it's going to be, because I want to be Spider-Man in VR while throwing bombs in asteroids. Also while doing flips, because why not? Because, you know, I guess sometimes you just need like a motion sickness simulator or whatever you're going to call it. But yeah, that's it for this video. So if you guys have other ideas for how we can make this even cooler, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear it because, I don't know, this game's already crazy, so can't be crazier than this. Well, it probably could be. I shouldn't say that. But yeah, if you guys have other ideas, let me know. But that's it for this video. So until next time, see you, Internet.